Okay, everybody. I realized that the technical issues I was having had to do with how long my video was ending up being. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down into two videos, one exploring the workspace of Illustrator and one discussing the actual project. I'm going to post this one this morning, and I'll post the one about the project on Wednesday. And that'll give you an opportunity to play around in Illustrator and kind of get used to the new workspace. When you open Illustrator, you're going to find that it looks very familiar. It looks a lot like Photoshop, and that is comforting, definitely. But you're also going to find that Illustrator operates very differently than Photoshop. And that's because they are based in two different kind of foundations, I guess. So Photoshop is based in pixels, so tiny little squares of things that make up an image. And Illustrator is vector-based. And vectors are smooth shapes. What does that mean? That means that something that's pixel-based, you can only enlarge to a certain extent before it begins to degrade and look pixelated, right? And in Illustrator, you can enlarge things indefinitely because they are not built up of pixels, they're built up of vectors. I'm going to share my screen just to show you an example of that. So here we are, and this is in Illustrator, but I have plopped a photograph in here, and this is a JPEG. And if you zoom in, you keep zooming in, you start to see all the little squares that are built up. And zooming in gives you the same visual effect as if I were to just come in here and alter the size of this image to something much larger than it originally was, then it would look like this. And that's not great, right? However, if I zoom in over here on this rectangle, which I drew in Illustrator, which is a vector-based shape, I can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, and the edge of that rectangle is still perfectly smooth. So, another difference between the two programs is that Photoshop is meant for working with photographs, and Illustrator is meant for making illustrations. Illustrations are things like you would see on the cover of Time magazine or the New Yorker for sure. Illustrator or illustrations also obviously appear in children's books, things like that. There's also a whole field called medical illustration. So Illustrator is good for that. Illustrator is also very good for graphic design. And so because you may be going into different fields, it's important to get to know Illustrator as well. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these two objects so that I can show you around this space a bit. As you can see, Illustrator looks very, very similar to Photoshop, but keep in mind that while some of the tools are they look the same or they have the same name, they're going to operate differently. So you can see you've got your toolbar over here with a variety of different tools. Up here is your tool menu, which will change based on what tool you've got. Over on your right, you have different palettes. And these are all condensed right now because I'm not using any of them. But at some point, I may want to come in and say, look at my color swatches. Now, as with Photoshop, if there is something that you need that's not over here, you can always go to Window. And all of these things down here, if they do not have a check mark next to them, are palettes that you can open. Feel free to click through those and see what those things look like. And if there is a check mark, then it means it's either over here and docked, or you might see it actually a floating palette out here. A good thing to keep in mind, since I have this window open, is that if you're working on a shared computer, which you may or may not be at this point, I mean, maybe you're sharing your computer with your family or your roommates, but especially once we get back to campus, and if you are working in one of our computer labs, it's definitely a shared space, right? So the person before you may have moved things around in Illustrator, and you can always reset your workspace to the default by going to Window, Workspace, make sure Essentials is checked, and then reset Essentials. The only thing that changed for me is that my library palette popped up. I don't need that, so I'm just gonna suck that back up into the docked station over here. The other thing to discuss is the fact that this big white space right here is in Illustrator referred to as the artboard. In Photoshop, it's referred to as the canvas. In Illustrator, you can have multiple artboards open in a single document, which is useful if you're doing like a series of design work. So let's say you're advertising a new business and you want to have a poster, and you want to make postcards that you're going to send out to new clients, and you want to make a business card, and you want all of them to have the same design elements. Well, you can open 3 different artboards that are different sizes in the same document, so that you can quickly and easily add the same design elements between all 3 things. We're only going to work with one artboard for now, and so you should only just see, well, when you open a new document, you should only just see one white rectangle. To open a new document, you're going to, just like with any program, File and New. And you'll see that in the dialog box here, you've got some different options. For today, I want you to make a document just called Playing Around or something. Yeah, Playing Around. And you can always change that later. Here's where I was talking about with the different artboards. Keep that to 1. And let's work with a tabloid size, because that's what we're ultimately going to be working with for the poetry broadsides. And, but you can play around. You can see there are different sizes here. The tabloid is going to be 17 inches by 11 inches. You can choose your orientation, whether you want it to be portrait or landscape. I chose landscape. And then press OK. I'm not going to press OK because I already have this nice blank artboard going on here. Okay, I'm really only going to show you a couple of tools. Illustrator is based in this idea that you can create things using shapes. That's kind of the baseline of Illustrator, is that you're creating design using shapes, or if you want to create something with the illusion of dimensionality, you're going to build that up out of shapes. So something that has the illusion of dimension is referred to as a form. So we're going to be building form out of shapes. So we're just going to start right off with the shape tool over here in the tool palette. And we're going to choose the rectangle. And you just click and drag to draw a rectangle. Bada bing, bada boom. Now you've got some cool options in Illustrator here with your rectangle highlighted. So when you have that blue bounding box around it, you can quickly and easily change the color of it if you want up here in your tool menu. So let's make a green rectangle. You can also give that rectangle a border. The border is referred to as the stroke. So right next to the fill color is this other drop-down box, and that will allow me to add a border or a stroke. So I can add this magenta stroke, and you can maybe barely see it there, But if I up that stroke weight and make it a thicker line, now it's a lot more obvious. You can also play with these various other options and see what happens. Remember that no matter what you do, you can always undo it by going to edit and undo if you need to. You're not going to break it. Like, you don't have to save, you don't have to make a masterpiece, you don't have to save it. You can always start over again. So don't be afraid to, play with this kind of stuff and see what happens. Something also to note about Illustrator is that unlike Photoshop, it's not really based on the idea of layers. So each individual object in Illustrator operates on its own. It doesn't need to be placed into a layer. You don't have to do anything special or fancy to be able to just use your selection tool to move that thing around. And it's not, if I were to draw another shape, which I'm going to, it's not going to be, they're not going to be attached to each other unless I choose for them to be attached to each other. Now, for what I'm going to do here, I don't want this magenta stroke. So I'm going to come up here to my tool menu, and I'm going to choose the top left option, which is the white square with a red slash through it, indicating none, no stroke color. And you'll see that the stroke immediately disappeared. Note that when you have that bounding box on your rectangle, on your shape, you can change the size of it. You can scale it up, you can scale it down, you can squish it if you need to. You can also grab onto these little corner buttons, and when you get that little arc next to your mouse, if you click on that and drag it, you can round the corners. I don't want rounded corners, so I'm going to just pop that right back out. Boop. And also note that for the majority of what I'm doing, I'm using the selection tool as opposed to the direct selection tool. So leave this one alone for now and only work with the selection tool. Okay, so let's talk about some fun things that you can do with shapes in order to create this sense of form, this illusion of form. Excuse me. Okay, so we want to turn this rectangle into a box. Well, what does a box need? It needs at least a side. We need to be able to see a side, right? So I'm going to build a shape over here that's going to indicate that this box has a side. I can do this in a couple different ways. I can draw another shape. Well, I mean, yes, I'm going to draw another shape. I could use the shape tool, the rectangle tool. And then I could do some fancy business to create a new shape. Or I can use the pen tool. The pen tool is going to put down what are called anchors. And what I can do is I can draw paths around where I want my shape to be. And this allows me to more freehand draw a shape. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom corner of my rectangle, and I'm going to click, and then I can let go of it, and it will pull along this blue line for me, indicating where the edge of my shape is going to be. And then I click to put another anchor point down, and I'm going to drag my mouse up, and I'm going to click to put another anchor point down, and you can see it's starting to fill in my shape. I'm going to bring it back over to my original rectangle, click again, and now even though the shape looks like it's completely filled in, you still need to bring your mouse back down to that starting anchor point. This closes the shape. So now I've freehand drawn this shape over here. And if I come out here and I click in the white space just to deselect that, you can maybe start to see that it's getting some dimension, but it's not super convincing yet. So what I need to do is I need to give this shape a slightly different color. So I'm going to click on that shape, and I'm going to come over here to my color chooser. I'm going to double click, and I'm going to give it just a slightly, let's give it a slightly lighter color. And now, all of a sudden, this becomes another dimension. I'm going to go ahead and make the top of this box in the same way. So I'm going to use that pen tool, and I'm going to click on that corner of the rectangle, and I'm going to draw until, see that green line? I'm going to draw until I get that little green line, which is telling me that I'm aligned with the back corner there. I'm going to click there. I'm going to come over here to that corner and click, this corner and click, and then remember you need to close that shape. Use my selection tool to unhighlight that. And now it really is looking like a box. I would change the color of this slightly so that it's not the same exact color as the side. And I'm envisioning for this, I'm envisioning that my light is coming from this direction. So I want this to be my lightest surface. I want this to be my darkest surface. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose something right in between, maybe about like that. And voila, I have a dimensional shape. Okay, I'm going to pause this right now, and I want you to go ahead and play around with making some dimensional shapes. And actually, I think I'm going to end up making this into maybe 3 videos. So the next video is going to be about combining shapes. So I was talking about making, doing some fancy work with a shape to create the side of the box. So we'll talk about combining shapes, and we'll talk about some shapes that maybe are not rectilinear. Okay, have fun with that. And part 2 of the video will be up probably, we'll say like this afternoon, maybe, we'll hope. Okay, have fun with this. And I guarantee that the video for the how to do the poetry broadside will be up by Wednesday evening. Okay, all right, have fun, enjoy. As always, reach out with any questions, and I will, well, you'll see me soon. All right, farewell.